Okay, we should be live now. I tried to make a note of everyone's name for the minutes of the meeting. I need a couple people to identify themselves. There is someone on the call who doesn't have video. Judith Judson.
Hi.
And hi. And then there's someone, first name Erica. If Erica could unmute herself and let me know your last name.
Good afternoon. This is Erica Bannerman.
Can you spell that, please?
Sure, it's B-A-N-N-E-R-M-A-N.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Then there is SS.
Yeah, that's nice. Steve Sunderhoff with PHI.
Thank you. And I saw an MLS. Did that? But that's gone away. So let me just make a couple more notes here. So as everyone knows, on November 6th, the Commission issued Order 89664, and then an errata a few days later in Case 9619, in which it directed the working group to reconvene to develop an updated recommendation on data collection, metrics, and related pilot parameters for each project approved in the order. And then for presently unquantified value streams, the working group should propose realistic metrics in anticipation of improved valuation methods in the future. And those are to be filed no later than March 31st. So as I indicated in my email, the topic of today is just for us to determine how the working group should proceed. I guess first to develop that updated recommendation. My suggestion, when I look back at what we submitted almost a year ago, would be that each person or entity that proposed or helped develop the metric that became a part of that submission would go back and do research to see if those metrics require updating or can be updated at this time. And at the same time, everyone else in the working group, to the extent they have some information they can add to that, could also propose updates to those metrics to be considered. So I know actually Steve Sunderhoff, I think the first draft of the submission, the tables at the end, came from you, but I don't know that all of the input into the tables did.
Right. So yeah, so my thought on the metrics is we can certainly go through that list and also make sure that we go through the underlying legislation and the commission order for any metrics that were mentioned there as well, right? So just need to look through each of those items. And I would note that in the order actually asked for the quantification of a couple of the items in those metrics, so we might want to think about whether or not anything else could be quantified as well as in that process.
You're talking about the second page of the spreadsheet.
Right. The ones that were not quantified, right? So the commission had that in its order as well.
Right. Whether we could at this point come up with quantification for those.
Right. And can I ask you just a clarifying question? Right now, the guidance on the metrics is these would be metrics that would be reported on through the pilot period, which is currently scheduled to run to December of 2026. And then do you have any guidance as to the thought on whether the metrics would run longer in time or how to think about that?
You mean beyond the legislation?
Right. So the end date that was specified in the commission order approving the 6 Exelon projects basically had those metrics, had the pilot period designated through December of 2026, I believe. And so I'm just trying to think about how we think of these metrics. So we'd be thinking of these through that time period or potentially beyond that, right?
Yeah, I'm assuming that I'm pulled up the legislation as you were talking. My guess is that the 2026 comes straight from the legislation, but I think I also recall that the metrics go through the time period that makes sense for the metrics, right?
Right, right. I was just wondering how to think about that, whether, because a lot of these projects will run at least 10 years, right, in length for the
Right.
storage. And so clearly the metric reporting period would be through the end of 2026. I'm just trying to think about, as we frame up these metrics, it's really focused on what would be provided as a result of the pilot for each project, right? And then it would be up to the commission to decide how much further in time those metric reports go on, right?
Yes. And conceivably, the last metric reporting sometime before. So the commission has to report on or before December 31st of 2026. Its recommendations for the continued development of energy storage. So it has to obviously have all of the metrics before that so it can make that report. I'm thinking that at that time when the utilities make their last report on the metrics that goes into the commission report to the legislature, that they would probably give some indication on what they proposed or an estimate of the continued value of the metrics. Because again, if you're going through 10 years, there's some number of years left, right?
Right, right. Yeah, just trying to get a sense to how to gauge that. So certainly from a utility standpoint, I mean, we and BGE and the PHI team and the BGE team could kind of develop kind of our update on those metrics, right? For consideration. I'm not sure about the timing of that. And think about, really think closely about what is able to be quantified in a reasonable manner for those reports. So that's kind of a discussion we'll need to have as we look forward.
Okay.
Yeah, because some things are going to be relatively easy to quantify, other things may be more challenging. So we just need to be kind of conscious of that as we look at that.
Do you want to go through and do you want to go through the first page of the spreadsheet now and talk about who came up with the metric previously? Or do you think that's a
Yeah, I mean, if you think that's helpful, certainly. Or we could just take that offline and for our next meeting, come prepared to kind of discuss each of those items. But your preference on that?
okay? I mean, I haven't been back to my office to get my notes, so I wouldn't be able to recollect where each of these came from. I only have them now in their final form.
Right, right.
So I don't know if I don't want to jog everyone's memory if people don't want to fess up to having anything to do with these metrics, but
Yeah, if you want to step through them, we can certainly do that. It's
okay,
up to
because
you.
what I don't want to do is come back in January and still have nothing on some of these because no one thought they were supposed to do anything.
Okay. If you want to show those right now?
Sure, I can. Theoretically, I can do that. Hang on just a second. Let's see. So how is everybody doing?
Good.
Go ahead and just jump in there.
You make me think I should be upstairs where our Christmas tree is.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the this is my allotted space in the house.
It looks good. It looks good. I had to
Yeah,
move up. I'm moving upstairs.
we all have our own corners, you know.
Get ready for the big snowfall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I've been sequestered to the basement.
So, all right. So I've emailed it from one computer to the other. So, see if I can manage the share screen concept here. Sorry, I thought everybody would, have this pulled up, but that's okay. I can do it. Let me try. There. Does everyone see it now?
No, not yet.
Oh, wait, I paused
We
it.
can see your mailbox. Email
Well, you don't
box.
want to see that.
Yeah, we see the December 31 submittal on the bottom of that. But yeah, it's the tables in the back of that document that you're referencing.
Yeah, I'm on
Yeah.
it on my screen. I may need to toggle to the actual document. Wow. Okay. Let's see. How about I download it? Oops. Shoot. Let me go back. Let me know if you see it.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay.
You got it.
All right. So the first one is air emissions, carbon emissions.
Yeah, and so that originally came from, I think, RAP, right? Provided that guidance originally.
Sounds right.
And yeah, and we received an instruction in the order we received to take another look at those calculations on air emissions, carbon emissions, which we'll talk about a little bit later, presumably in the call, right, related to our February 1st compliance filing.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Can
RAP,
can I interrupt? This is Kathleen Wayness from the Maryland Department of the Environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, hey. Hi, nice to chat with you. I am one of the people who's on phone. I apologize. I worked a lot with Nitzen Goldberger on that, also with RAP. And as I understand it, Nitzen has, I doubt she's on the call because I tried reaching her earlier this year and she had transferred on. But I was hoping to be able to work on that again. I contributed a little bit, but I was hoping to be a little bit more engaged this go round, if that is acceptable.
Certainly. I haven't spoken to anyone from RAP, but I will, after this meeting, get back in touch with them to the extent we're still looking for further input from them.
If I could just note, this is Steve Latender from Synapse Energy Economics. I'm supporting the Office of People's Counsel. And we, as part of our review of the pilot applications, we did some analysis of carbon emission impacts from those projects, and we certainly have some expertise to bring to that discussion as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and
So,
I also reviewed a lot of OPC's comments, and it was really insightful. Thank you. You know, I thought it was pretty good. Thank you.
Certainly.
Steve,
yeah,
do you have Steve? I'm sorry, Steve Latendra. Do you have a proposal? Like, do you think you'll be submitting something to the working group for consideration? Maybe I should ask Mr. Cleaver. Or
we did have recommendations in our report that we produced on behalf of OPC.
that differed from the metrics.
Methodology. That's correct. We offer some recommended revisions to the methodology that was in that December 2019 report from this group.
Okay. Hey, Joe Cleaver.
Yes, Your Honor.
How do you propose we proceed? The working group proceeds.
Well, along the lines of what Your Honor sketched out at the beginning of this call, where we go through these, and then to the extent that any stakeholder, whether it was the original proposing party or anybody else, has feedback, we would be prepared to follow whatever instructions Your Honor gives to us in terms of providing something in advance of the next meeting in writing, if you think that would aid the discussion. But yeah, there are a number of these I do believe where OPC, with the assistance of Synapse, would have some ideas for some modifications or additions, or perhaps even some additional metrics, to the extent that's something that Your Honor would consider.
Okay. Well, it's really for the whole working group to consider. And then I'm just trying to figure out the best format. We don't have Neats on anymore because she moved to a different position. So it sounds as though it'll be a written submission by parties who wish to, and then our next meeting will discuss them. If that's a time frame that the parties can work with.
I think that makes sense, Judge. I think having something in writing, before we get into the nitty gritty on these, in advance of the next meeting, would probably be helpful to aid the discussion.
Okay, so just when we're setting up the next meeting, we just need to be mindful of the time that people need to make those written submissions and for people to review them. So if you can help me remember to, it sounds like it'll probably be end of January maybe before we're able to kind of go through all of that and meet again. I'm thinking, but if it's longer than that, just let me know. Okay, so it sounds as though I need to talk to RAP, and there might be some, again, like we did before, there were, I think, a lot of offline discussions between people and people making or having discussions to gather input, but then we'll have a written sort of round shared with everyone so that we can review the proposed updated metrics at the next meeting. Health benefits, back to you, Steve Sunderhoff.
Yeah, I think that was my recollection, was we were turning to the EPA calculator that was now available, and that was prepared in conjunction with Nissan and RAP, I thought, as well, on the health benefits.
Okay. So the same idea there. I don't know if that's one that Synapse had offered a different metric or not, but Mr. Latendra?
Your Honor, no, we did not, but we certainly can take another look. We do have some expertise on our staff on those issues.
Okay. The next one was deferral or avoidance of utility distribution and transmission construction cost savings. I think that was fairly straightforward. Is that what the last page of the submission outlined, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, that is what the document itself outlined, provided a description. Yep.
Okay. Did you intend to update that for any reason?
Yeah, I don't think so. Tom Shetty, are you on? You might have a comment on that.
I think Your Honor, we made it very simplified. We might elaborate it into the extent what was described in the filing. That's all. It's just to provide more clarity, because when we did this, probably, and what we actually submitted, there might be a little more. We might have some additional features or additional descriptions. That's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. Does anyone on the call anticipate having any input on this particular metric?
Judge Lawrence, OPC didn't have any specific, that I recall, any really major concerns with any of the deferral values that the Exelon utilities used in their filings. But this is a big, in general, this is an important issue for us. So we would like to reserve the right to potentially, propose some, modification based on what the commission ruled, kind of along the lines of what Mr. Shetty just said, whenever we do submit something in writing. So at this point, I'm not aware of any major concerns, but this is an important issue to OPC.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, the next one was optionality.
Right, and that's what we agreed to originally in the layout with Needson, and Tom and I worked through that.
Yeah,
so
I don't see where that would necessarily need to be updated based on
Yeah, I don't think so. I think where we'd be at would be looking at that on the projects during whatever pilot period we have to report out on whether we've achieved any optionality benefits on each project. I think that's where that would go.
Okay.
Right. This is Dan Hurley with staff. I think we brought up in our comments on optionality, we were just more concerned about the kind of the timing of when it was starting and when it was ending.
Okay. Yeah, and just a little reminder, and there might be some people on the call who are confused. There's always still going to be, I believe, I'm not involved in 9619, but it sounds as though there are going to be comments made on the actual values pursuant to these metrics, and that's always going to be the case. The working group, the purpose is to update the metrics that were agreed upon before, not necessarily comment on the values of those, if that makes sense. Just it's the group's supposed to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, looking forward is what you're saying in terms of these valuations, right?
Well, I think what the working group accomplished before was coming up with the metrics that the utilities then use to evaluate projects and then bring them to the commission. And I think to a certain extent, the commission used these metrics as well. What I'm saying is the working group in no way gets into the valuation aspect
Right.
of any of the projects. We're not going to do that. Our purpose is to look at these and see whether they need to be updated with, if any of them were based on market data that is now outdated, that's something that would need to be updated. If we've learned something in the year that has transpired that changes the metric, then we need to update it. But parties are still going to probably have similar comments as they had before.
Yeah,
and that's just going to be the way that we can't solve that.
Yeah, the one thing I would point to is that we will be tracking whatever metrics come up, right, as utilities, and we just need to think carefully about how we'll measure each of these items, right? So what we need to track to basically provide that data back. So we just need to think through that.
Right, and as we're going through these, if any of these are not applicable to the projects that were approved, and again, because I'm not involved in 9619, I don't know that there are or aren't certain metrics that are just aren't applicable to the projects that were approved.
Yeah, fair enough. Some of the, there are situations where not all of the metrics will apply to each of the projects. That's right. But where any of the metrics apply to any of the projects, we have that list, and if it's not relevant, then we wouldn't report on that particular metric for that project. Right?
And we wouldn't even bother to update it.
Well, yeah, unless it was relevant to another project, right? One of the six.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if
six we have.
Yeah. Okay. There's 6. I didn't know if there's there's between
2 more pending from Atomic Edison, right?
Okay. So maybe there's not the instance that there's a metric that just we don't need to update because no project it's not doesn't apply to any of the 6+ projects.
Right. So there'll be 2 more at the end of this. There may be 2 more at the end of this process, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we're up to energy conservation during time of peak. We had used, and Dan, you might have more information on this, Empower assumed values for peak versus non-peak energy. I don't know if that's something that can be updated or should be updated at this point or not.
Yeah, I'll get back to you on that. We do have the new plans proposed the commission's going to roll on, and we did update some of those values. I just can't remember if we gave the updated values to this group or not, but when we have updates, we can share them with this group for these metrics.
Okay.
Yeah, and Dan, I would think that we'd want to use the Empower assumptions then here that are consistent, right? Is your thinking?
Yeah, just a consistent number across,
Yeah.
all programs, at least trying towards, these are all kind of under a big umbrella of environmental policy. So
Rather than go back and calculate numbers, we'd use what the Empower assumptions are, right? Is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
And is that the same for 6 peak shaving?
So you have value assumptions and Empower as well for 6, right, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever's consistent with that is probably appropriate. It'll cause the least confusion probably in Maryland, right, if we use consistent assumptions.
And then down under the Pgm Market Activities. Now, these are probably items that need to be updated, but would be updated as a matter of course, since they're based on the market.
Yeah, they're based on actual revenue streams out of the market. And just a note, these revenue streams are likely to change over time as the rules related to energy storage participation change. So depending on whether we can achieve a particular market benefit, we would report out that benefit here.
Right, but as far as updating the metric, because the metric comes straight from the PGM market, there's nothing for us to update. The utilities would update based on the market changes.
It's certainly my view, yes.
That is right, Your Honor. Basically, previously we had projected certain revenues. Now we are going to see the actual revenues, and whatever the actuals comes, that is, at least we are thinking to report the actual revenues.
Okay.
We are using as a revenue as a proxy, a bogey here.
Yeah, so there's not an assumption needed. We're just reporting out numbers is the idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to add a note to that effect or not, but
Yeah,
we might want to add a note like that. Yeah.
And I guess it would depend on if there's any kind of legislation activity about, not saying we're going to leave PGM, but there's always some discussion about doing the fixed reserve requirements on Maryland on our own as opposed to being part of the PGM market. So I guess we need to.
Well, right. There always could be
nimble on that. These all could go away.
Yeah, Dan, you're right. There could be a bunch of changes, and so PGM world is never stable, right?
And if there were those kind of major changes, what would happen to metrics 7 through 13?
We'd have to revisit that, right?
It'd probably be a little more Maryland specific, I guess, but yeah, we definitely have to revisit those and figure out how they would work.
All right. At least another note to that effect.
This is Steve from Synapse. It's my understanding that if the state does by chance pursue the fixed resource alternative it would just be a capacity market. Those resources would still be able to participate in the energy and ancillary services markets if that transformation does occur.
Okay.
The fixed resource requirement as an alternative to PJM's capacity market.
Okay, then I think we can hop down to 14, reliability. Help me out, Steve.
Yeah, this is the LBNL calculator that we've used in the past in Maryland, right? So unless a better calculator is available, we're not aware of one at this point. So we continue to use presumably the LBNL calculator for this benefit.
Okay, so we'd be looking for other members of the working group to let us know if they've come across a better calculator.
Yeah, if there's something other than LBNL's calculator, but it has been accepted by the Maryland Commission previously, so it might be easier to stick with that unless there's something better, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And service quality. Value of avoided investment in traditional utility solution.
Yeah, there's not a calculation on that, right? It's what we're able to save through the use of a battery to address a service quality issue, right? So it's similar to a deferral or an avoidance of other distribution investments.
Similar, but you had a project for which this was a separate.
Yeah, right. So if we were to improve the voltages in a particular location and it avoids another utility investment, that's the savings that we're talking about here.
So that's a straight dollar.
That's a straight dollar calculation. Yeah.
Okay. Affordability, cost impact, and dollar per distribution.
So all of the utilities, we certainly did provide an estimate of the bill impact for customers. So I would think that, I don't know whether you would continue to report on that, but we had a net number. So it was like the net bill effect that we projected for each project. And some of the projects provided more dollar benefits than costs. Others provided higher costs than benefits, right? And those numbers were reflected in our estimates. So as you look forward in time, if we were to do a similar calculation, you'd stack up the quantified benefits and the specific dollar costs, and you could do the same calculation over time, over the long run. I don't know how frequently you'd report that, but we'd have to think about the frequency of some of these things.
Yeah, the reporting is sort of another
Right.
another thing altogether. This is just, there's nothing for the working group to update on this metric.
Right.
Okay, so then we're to the non-financially quantified. And at least as I recall, the reason they're not quantified is because they couldn't easily be quantified.
Right.
Has anyone on the call want to speak up and say that they have come across a way to quantify numbers, any of numbers 1 through 13? Don't hear anything. Did OPC, Mr. Latendra, did Synapse come up with any ways to value any of these items?
We haven't gotten to that level yet, but we do believe there is a potential opportunity to assess the hosting capacity as distributed storage is deployed within the network. There could be some value to determining what the increase in hosting capacity for distributed energy resources might be.
Okay, so number 3. And Mr. Cleaver, that would be something that would be in your written submittal, I guess?
Yes, Your Honor, we would be willing to provide our thoughts on that. Steve, do you think that, using the judge's proposed idea of, the next meeting probably being in late January, so a submission due sometime, I don't know, Your Honor, would you, like a week or 10 days, how soon before the next meeting would you want the submissions?
Yeah, at least 10 days, I think.
All right, so by mid-January, Steve, do you think that you may be able to at least provide some preliminary thoughts on that, on number 3 here?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yes, Your Honor, we would include that in our filing.
Okay.
Your Honor, this is Ed Tracy from PHI. One thing I'll mention is on number 1, we are looking at NOx emissions potentially, and PJM does have some data, so that is something we're looking at, and we'll put that in our February 1st filing.
Okay, and so then prior to that, you'd make a submission to the working group for its consideration?
I guess, Steve, you can weigh in on that. How best we do that?
Yeah. So the only caution there, Ed, is so long as we have that fully framed up and you're ready to go with kind of what you might want to share with the working group, that's probably okay. It just depends on the timing, really, how far you're able to get for that time, because we do have the February 1st obligation for the compliance filing for the utilities, and the only question is whether or not we have that information with sufficient time to discuss it with the working group.
Okay.
At a time, yeah. So later on this call, if there's time, right, if you're able to do so, we'd like to kind of share kind of what we're thinking about the working group filing as well. I mean, the compliance filing, I should say, on the first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I know land use, at least conceivably, can be quantified. It was the difficulty in doing so. I don't know if anyone on the call has had any experience in that in the last year of actually being able to put dollars to that easily.
Yeah, there was at one point one of the stakeholders, and I forget who it was, thought they might be able to come up with a dollar value. Maybe that was RAP. We don't have a clear dollar value. I guess on an individual project, you could calculate it. A little bit difficult to do so for the pilots, which are relatively small in size compared to the system. So
do you have okay, so to the extent the commission's looking for future guidance and not just the pilot projects, you have something you think you could offer in terms of how that would be calculated on a larger project?
Yeah, it's a difficult calculation. We'd have to spend a little more time thinking about that. I know that I think it was RAP that thought they might come up with a dollar value. That dollar value is really going to be all over the place depending on the location and the avoidance in Maryland, right? So a project that is sited in, in a place in the suburban Washington area might have higher value than a project sited somewhere else on the system, depending on the value of land in those locations. That kind of thing.
I'm wondering if there could just be a greater discussion of what would go into that calculation.
That would be great. That would be great. We can think about it, but it would also be great if other stakeholders thought about it as well.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Anything on electrical vehicle transportation coming up with dollars there?
Yeah, so one of our projects goes to the heart of that issue with supporting an electric bus transit center. If there was an accepted way of valuing that additional electric transportation, I mean, one of the things we might look to is the cost effectiveness study that is related to improvements in charging facilities and that type of thing by the utilities. So maybe there's some valuation there that we can look at.
Okay. Economic development might be still challenging.
That was really thinking about jobs that were created as a result of the battery storage projects and other benefits that they might provide towards economic development over time. So we know that initially when the projects go in, there's a level of economic development related just to the investment in putting the battery in place. We can certainly track, I suppose, the number of jobs that are related to each of the projects. We had some DRs earlier in time about that kind of thing.
Okay. So one element of it could be quantified. I'm not sure you get to a financial valuation.
Hard to, we could certainly, right. It's hard to, put a dollar value on that number, but it would certainly relate to the number of jobs in Maryland related to projects. Yeah.
Okay. And I guess, I don't know, is it too much of a stretch to go from jobs to taxes to?
Yeah, good question. I don't know how much of that information would be accessible. Yeah.
Somebody else wanted to comment?
I was just going to comment, there are economic impact models that are used for this purpose on occasion. One is called REMI, and the other is IMPLAN. And you take a given investment and you run it through an economic model of the region, and it can determine the jobs, the GDP impacts, and the tax benefits. But to the degree that these projects, I think, are relatively small, I don't know that that would yield significant benefits in terms of greater understanding or learning. But there are those tools that are out there.
Okay. So,
again, the macroeconomic modeling is a bit costly and involved, but it's certainly there, right? The REMI model is certainly out there too, the IMPLAN. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe a little more narrative about the possibilities for larger projects down the road with just only the level of number of jobs for these pilot projects, something like that.
Right.
Learnings, I'm not sure we're going to get a dollar value on learnings ever.
Yeah, I don't know what's knowledge worth in Maryland, right? So, yeah, good question.
Non-utility participation value of vendor contracts. Now that probably has a dollar value.
We have a dollar value, right? It's in our filings related to how much each project is estimated to cost, and then we'll have the actual money spent over time.
Okay. Offshore wind. Does that apply to any of the projects?
It doesn't, in my view. Anyone else?
I agree with you, Steve. At least I didn't see that either.
Okay, so maybe we don't need to worry about trying to update a non-quantifiable metric.
Yeah, the other one the legislature had like that was the value for nuclear assets. That was either in the commission or the legislation, right? Any enhancement to nuclear units. It's probably similar, right?
Okay. Grid services operational flexibility related to delivery of electricity.
So that's a notable improvement, difficult to assign a value to.
Yeah. Resilience, higher value for select locations, another macroeconomic benefit.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at ways to model that. Again, it's difficult to value resiliency.
Okay.
You know,
And
REMI, or you could do something like REMI, but it's difficult. Yeah.
any of the projects coming up with a benefit for low and moderate income seniors or schools?
You know, the electric transit bus depot provides benefits for for LMI and seniors large, you know, in addition to the regular demographics.
And how are you valuing it?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, which is why it's on an
Okay.
non-financially
I thought maybe
quantified.
you meant you
But
had
there are certain projects that provide more benefits to LMI customers and seniors, and a good one is when electric transit buses clearly serve you know, a demographic that is helpful to acknowledge right there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean I think that's why it appears on attachment A. But if we're still not going to be able to put a value on it.
Right. Difficult to do.
Third-party supplier participation.
Yeah, that was the idea that we aren't preventing any customers from participating with third-party energy suppliers out of any of the projects.
Right.
And
We're not going to quantify that, I don't believe.
yeah. We're not aware of any interference that we're causing, but we'll certainly watch that.
Okay. Yeah, and any time anyone on the call has information other than what I have, I mean, it just doesn't seem like something that is going to be quantified. Still, it's not something that's going to change with time with a new model or something. And lastly, willingness to pay.
Yeah, that related largely, I mean, yeah, it could relate to the electric bus depot, but largely to an elk neck battery where it's behind the meter batteries, and what customers might be willing to pay if they had to make the investment for such a backup battery at their homes. So we'll do some market research, but exactly how we'd quantify that a little bit unclear at the moment.
Okay. But again, if anybody comes up with something on that, they will share it with the working group for its consideration at the next meeting. So just to sort of recap, it sounds like the big ones that are going to be updated are really toward the beginning: air emissions, carbon emissions.
Right, it's the air emissions items that would have the biggest, and then anything Dan has from the Empower assumptions, right?
Right, updating the Empower assumptions for items 6 through, well, let's see. Dan, you're on the hook for 6, 8, and I don't know. That might be it.
And so when we think of the timing, right, so the timing of these metrics are when these projects come up and running. So it sounds like the earliest is roughly 2022 before these numbers actually begin to be tracked, right, for the majority of them. Not all of them, but for the majority.
So is that some narrative that we're updating them based on the latest information, but they need to be updated continually?
Yeah, we'll update it annually, maybe something like that, and then report it out when the projects begin to operate. The other thing that I want to mention is that we should review the legislation, authorizing legislation, and also the commission order to look at the metrics that are listed in those documents. Make sure there's nothing else that we should pick up as we look at things going forward.
Yeah, what's listed in the order?
I have to go back and review it. I haven't reviewed it for this meeting, but we just want to go through that checklist and make sure we're picking up anything, because it's difficult later in time to pick up anything that we might want to have in the metrics if we don't identify it up front.
Okay, I pulled it up.
You're good. Yep.
Page 28, paragraph 92. In addition to data and information required to be tracked by PUA section 7-216H7, both the working group in its December 31, 2019 report and staff proposed additional metrics that the utilities would track and report. Is this what you're talking about?
Yeah. I thought there was a list in there, and then there's a list in the legislation too. So we just want to look at both places, I think.
I don't Does someone else know what he's talking about, the list and the order? We can go to the list and legislation next, but I didn't read this that closely, but I didn't remember seeing a list.
Yeah, and it may not be. It may have just been a general discussion, right, in the order. I just want to make sure that we've picked up everything that's been identified either there or in the legislation. Yeah.
This is Justin from BGE. Yeah, I've got all the orders and the legislation. I didn't see anything that went in any of the orders that went into the detail that the legislation does. So if the legislation does enumerate, I think, about 48 items of data that should be part of these filings in July of 2023, 2024. A lot of them do sort of, cover some of these filings, but some of them are just more factual based. The name of the developer, type of energy storage technology, et cetera, which may not be necessarily things that need to be put to the working group because they're factual based. But to Steve's point, I think anything that we file in March should address those data points there in the legislation. I'm happy to send the copy of legislation to the group, or if anybody wants to review it, or send a link to it.
Yeah, I guess I'm surprised. I have it now in the 48 items. The working group didn't, because if you look again back at attachment A, we cited the legislation and the section that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, it's simply a cross check to make sure that we
didn't miss anything.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, because there were so many items listed, certainly in the legislation. I just want to make sure that we've picked up everything that we need to
Yeah,
do
but
in
I
terms of
think
tracking. Yeah.
maybe I'm misunderstanding because the purposes I saw it was costs and benefits, and some of these things, as I guess Justin noted, they don't really have anything to. Well, they don't go into costs and benefits, right?
Right. Yeah, they're not value streams as much as just baseline data that the commission would like to see in terms of facts about the project and sort of its operation, aside from value streams.
Okay, so if we failed to do it before, we can certainly cross-check again. I'd be surprised if there's anything in 7 Roman numeral little I that we didn't pick up in attachment A. That's quantified.
Probably not. I just want to make sure that we've picked up all the things that we need to get, right? So that's yeah. I mean, because the idea from my perspective is as we build these projects out and we install them, we just want to make sure that we have the ability to collect any data that's required as part of the process. Just don't want to miss anything as we move forward with the implementation.
Okay, and then were you still concerned there's something in the order that goes beyond the 48 items in the legislation?
I just have to look back at it. I haven't looked back at that order for this discussion. Yeah, I just want to make sure we're comprehensive. That's all.
Yeah, no, I understand. Any of the council on the call, if they want to review the order and let me know if there's something added to the 48 items that the working group should take a look at. You'll let me know. Joe.
Yes.
Who else? I'll go back. I'll stop sharing and I'll call you out if I have to. But the council on the call are going to get back to me if there's something in the order that we need to add to attachment A.
Yes,
I'm thinking, thank you. I think what we're doing is we're submitting an updated attachment A, right?
Yeah, yes, Your Honor. Well, to answer your question, Your Honor, yes, well, OPC would certainly be willing to do that, and we plan to. Also, just to go back to something that you said about 10 or 15 minutes ago, and just to mention something else in the order, you were making a distinction between metrics versus values, and I follow if I understood what you were saying that we're not going to get into the specific values to be used for individual projects in this group, which I think is correct. I would point out though that paragraph 93 of the errata order, that's the paragraph immediately below the one that I think Your Honor was just reading from a couple minutes ago. It says the updated recommendation. It does say metrics and pilot parameters for each project. It also says data collection. So I guess the the manner in which data is collected or shared or kept. It appears that from reading this paragraph that would be something that would, in addition to adding anything to or updating anything from Exhibit A, that may be something else that the commission would want to hear from the working group on. If I understand, if that's how I understand paragraph 93. Maybe there's others who have a different.
That's an interpretation.
Different understanding.
I guess I read it as updating attachment A, but I could see why you're reading it the way you're reading it. I guess I read it as updating attachment A because what the working group did before was attachment A, right? But we can certainly provide some more information and a recommendation on data collection. If everybody, the members of the working group are wanting to do that as well. I mean, it's additional work, but if the working group wants to do that, we can certainly put together a recommendation for data collection. Anybody want to chime in?
At this point, Your Honor, I'm not, just speaking for OPC, I don't, as far as I know, we're not planning to have some huge report on data collection. I think we've made a lot of the points that we wanted to make on that already, but we may have some. I just don't want to foreclose us from making that. Again, when we sit down and put pen to paper to provide, to draft something to share with the group in advance of the next call.
Yeah,
to the extent we have anything to say there, we may, say something about data collection. And I just wanted to make sure I was understanding what, when Your Honor's comments, early in the call about we're only looking at metrics, just to bring that up as a something that's possibly slightly different than metrics per se, that we may address.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess a year ago we came up with the metrics, and then with respect to data collection, I was simplifying it and just assumed the data collection was pursuant to the legislation, and there was really nothing more that was needed. I'm taking from what you're saying that you think there is more than just the legislation that the working group could provide in terms of data collection.
I think I don't mean to be. I don't mean to hedge too much.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible. So I don't know.
It's possible. I'll try to give you a better sense of OPC's more defined view on that when we submit something to the group before the next meeting.
And let me know, is it a interpretation of the legislation where the legislation isn't clear on what's required to be reported on?
I don't know. I wouldn't, my personal view, I don't think that there's anything in the legislation that seems inconsistent or contradictory, but it sounds to me like the commission perhaps wants to heal, or at least is willing to entertain any ideas anybody has about data collection. So
okay.
Just wanted to point that out. And yeah, I'll have a more kind of defined response for you when we meet next time.
Okay, how about related pilot parameters? We got anything on that? What does that mean?
Sounds pretty broad, right?
Okay.
So
I mean, I lumped
mean anything we want it to mean.
I mean, I kind of lumped the whole what's that called? The something comma. That whole phrase together is, like I said, just kind of updating what we did before. But we can certainly provide some narrative on data collection. I don't know that I really think pilot parameters and the metrics on attachment A, that's really the same thing, I think. I don't know. I don't know what pilot parameters mean. Taken out of context, I don't know what that means. I only know what it means sort of in connection with the other words in that sentence. Okay, but yes, anybody can submit anything they think the working group should put together as part of its submission that we have to make by March 31st for consideration for the entire group at the next meeting. And then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, the only just one comment. We just need to make sure that it's something that we can collect, right? So when you think about it,
project specific.
Yeah, I mean, to make sure that it's collectible by the utilities for the project, right? So when you think about it, something that is not collectible, right, yeah, is difficult to provide in a metric, right? So ideally something that we can collect and measure.
Well, are any of the 48 items in the legislation unable to be collected?
I got to look at. I have to look at the list. Yeah, sorry.
Can't imagine they put together a list of 48 items that.
Well, right. So we just want to look through the list to make sure that everything can be collected, right? So
Okay. So you'll let me
within
know.
reason. Yeah, we're going to take a look. We'll take a hard look at that. Yeah.
Okay. You getting some developer warranties, some manufacturer warranties? You using inverters? You got those? Need the type and manufacturer?
Right. Right. You're getting in the list, right? So
I'm in the list.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So as far as the next meeting, since it sounds like we have a few tasks. Is PHI good with meeting end of January, but a submittal 10 days before the meeting time frame?
we should be good with that. The only flag on that is we are also preparing the February 1st filing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anything, like for example, the NOx item that was mentioned by our environmental team, if something were to change, right, we'll be working through that process in January. So just want to flag that.
So but you want to push it as far to the end of January as possible then?
Yeah, well, from my vantage point, that would be better because we'll have a better sense of exactly what will be in the February 1st filing at that point.
Okay, so does everyone have their January calendars? I'm looking at the 28th of January. It's a Thursday. Let's see if I can. It is blissfully wide open on the commission calendar. How does the 28th of January look for people for our next meeting?
Okay, on my end.
Your Honor, I have a conflict that day. There's a FERC proceeding involving actually Delmarva. Anybody from Delmarva want to call it Delmarva formula rate? I have to go to a settlement conference. But if that's the only day that works for everybody, Fred Hoover from OPC is familiar with this docket as well, and he and Dr. Latender can be available. As far as I know, does that work for you, Steve?
Yes, I'm currently available on the 28th.
So
Okay.
OPC can do that, but if there's another day, that would be better for me personally. But we can do it. And it also this proceeding I just mentioned is in the morning, so it could potentially conclude. So afternoon would be better as well if you're going to go with the 28th, Your Honor.
Okay. Yeah, I used to be told afternoon was better for people on the West Coast. I don't know if we still have people on the West Coast actively involved, but we can certainly do the afternoon on the 28th. Same time as today. I think that would work then for having the written submissions due to the working group by the 15th. I don't know if you meant 10 business days or 10 working days, but if we did the 15th, and that would hopefully give everyone, there's a holiday in there, but time to review it before the 28th. Does that work?
This is Justin from BG. Yeah, that works for me. Both the 15th and the 28th.
So the working group and me will be looking for, I will be looking for the submissions by the 15th, end of the business day, and then I'll set the meeting for 3 o'clock on the 28th. Unless, are we thinking this is going to take a lot more time than we needed today? Maybe we should start at 2 because we might have to go to 5.
Yeah, I would allow at least 2 hours.
Okay, we'll start at 2 on the 28th, and hopefully Mr. Cleaver can join us. If not, Mr. Hoover. And yeah, is there anything else we need to talk about today? I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Hey, Matt, are you on?
He is still showing.
Yeah.
Yes, I am. And the January 28th at 2 p.m., that should work for me as well, Your Honor.
Okay, good.
Yeah, so she asked if there's anything else we wanted to discuss the February 1st submittal, Matt, as well, briefly.
If there's time, I think we just wanted to give the working group at least just an idea of where we're looking at to approach the various aspects of the compliance filing, Judge?
Okay, that's fine with me.
If
people have to leave, they might pop off. But
Okay.
That's fine with me.
Okay. Steve, you want to take it away?
Yeah, we were going to start probably with our environmental group. That was going to Ed speak about that a little bit on the environmental side. You want to jump in there?
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Yes, just a quick update, Your Honor and folks. Talk about specifically around, I guess, paragraph 88, the revised projections for emissions. A few things we're looking at to revise those in preparation for our February 1st submittal is one, we do agree that there is data out there more granular than annual. I think OPC and the synopsis report mentioned that. So we're looking into those numbers. And just looking at other places we can find more detailed emissions data. We did check with PJM. They do not have anything beyond the monthly numbers. They don't do hourly numbers or anything like that. So we would be working with the monthly numbers for emissions. And the other thing we're doing in terms of revising our projections is updating, I would say, sort of our assumptions of emissions around one, about the project type, and also about the assumptions about how these operate. So for what credits we can take for peak shaving versus ancillary markets. So trying to get a little bit more detail there. And then the other piece we're looking at in terms of updating is, I think we use a generic round trip efficiency number, and we're looking to see if we can get a little bit more detail since the batteries are, they degrade over time. So we can potentially, build that into the emission calculations with the start of what the battery's life will look like, what the operations performance is, and then until the 10-year period. So we can maybe get some more granularity there. And then the other piece we're working at is kind of, I guess, more detailed in paragraph 89, looking at monitoring data going forward. And we're just starting to look into the projects and what data is available. Obviously, we'll be able to get more detailed about the actual usage. And what we're trying to figure out now is just what that data looks like, and then how we can come up with emission factors for the time that they're either discharging or charging. So it's kind of a quick update of where we are right now.
Okay.
Right. And go ahead.
Oh, does anyone have any comments on that? That was mainly, you said paragraph 89, right?
It's 88 is the N89.
Okay.
Ed, this is Kathleen Wayness over at MDE. I might be able to help you with some of that data, get it down to an hourly level.
Okay, yeah. If I can get we'll follow up with Steve or others and get your contact information. We can talk.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anything else on emissions? All right. The next time we had a requirement on was Pjm certification for the projects that are going to participate in the Pjm market and derive some level of revenue stream back. David, did you want to provide that update? Sure. David Bloom. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and stakeholder. The Ocean City, National Harbor, Fairhaven, and Chesapeake Beach project have all entered the PJM New Service Interconnection queue. The queue, which PJM refers to as the AG1 queue, closed on September 30th. These queue requests will lead to a wholesale market participation agreement, or WMPA. And essentially, the WMPA allows the projects to access the PJM markets. Additionally, as part of the WMPA process with PJM, the projects will also each be submitting an application and requirements for the level interconnection study, and really using an RFP process sometime in early.
David?
Yes.
You're breaking up.
Okay, I apologize. Is this better if I get a little bit closer?
Yeah, so far.
Yeah, sorry. So just lastly, like the utilities will be using the RFP process to submit the wholesale market scheduler and to meet burning documents. Outset, this has This is the reference here is the paragraph from the November 6th.
What paragraph?
80.
Did you say B?
80, 80.
80. Okay. Thank you.
I'm available for any questions or comments.
Does anybody have any questions or comments on the PGM participation certification issue?
Yeah, I have one addition. This is Steve. For the Elk Neck project, we actually were asked to also provide information about the Pgm market participation of Elk Neck. We have applied for the advanced technology pilot project proposal within PJM. We're working on those details with PJM staff now. And initially, we anticipate that that project would participate in the market as a DR type asset within the regulation D marketplace. And over the longer run, we'd participate under the rules that are yet to be established under FERC Order 2222 for aggregated behind the meter energy storage participation in the PJM market. So that information we would present in our February 1st filing related to that. And David spoke about the PHI, all of the projects for the utility side that are sponsored, Ocean City and National Harbor in our case, and then Fairhaven, BGE's case.
Okay.
So any questions on any of those items? Yeah, the third item we had, Jason Tucker is going to speak about, and that is related to fire safety and decommissioning, which were asked to also submit a compliance filing on February 1st. Jason, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and fellow stakeholders. Just wanted to give a brief update on the direction we were going for the fire and explosion prevention and mitigation, as well as the decommissioned disposal aspects of the order. And just for reference, this is paragraphs 90 and 91 of the order. From a fire and explosion prevention mitigation description perspective, we plan on putting together a plan that takes a look at all the fire risks associated with the installations, the standards and certifications that each system will comply with. We're going to ask each one of the vendors to provide a description of how fire and thermal events will be detected, how monitoring systems and alarms will notify the associated parties, and how fire events will be mitigated through fire suppression systems. Also addressing specifically with Elk Neck any additional risks that might be present associated with the installation of resources at customers' homes, residential customers' homes, and then in this case, Sunverge's plans for informing potential participants of any risks. Also be addressing how the systems could apply with applicable aspects of various National Fire Protection Association standards for overall energy storage systems, as well as explosion prevention and mitigation. And then lastly, we'll be describing the testing and commissioning protocols for the fire protection systems, the training for the local fire departments, and emergency responder protocols that would be put into an overall operations plan for the systems. And these systems will be reviewed and approved by PHI and BGE respectively, as well as capture any costs that are already built into the vendor's bids. We did already include a set of fire protection requirements with our initial RFPs, and we'll be asking each of the vendors to kind of take the plans for their respective systems and put it down on paper for the February 1st filing. So I'll pause there for any questions or comments before I move to the decommissioned disposal, since that's a little bit different.
So the costs of all the fire protection measures and everything else is direct cost. Is there any, I guess, valuation of the potential risk as far as cost? Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think I do understand what you're asking. As far as if an event were to happen, what the potential cost of that could be. Is that essentially what you're asking?
Yeah, I don't think that's, my guess is that's not really in any of our metrics.
I think you're correct. I don't believe that was our intention at this point to look at the potential risks if an event were to happen and the cost of that risk to the projects. Obviously, we're looking to prevent those events from happening through a set of protocols that we're going to put in place. But we weren't planning on specifically looking at that. But that's a good suggestion that we could take back, and if others feel that that's necessary.
Well, it just occurred to me. I don't know if anyone else on the call thinks that that cost would be anything that would, I suspect the risk is low, so that by the time you get to the actual value that would be associated with any of the projects, we're not talking about a substantial amount of money. But I don't know. Is there someone else who has a thought on whether the value associated with the risk of a fire event or explosion or something should be included in either the cost metric number 1 or a separate line item, cost 1 or 2, 1A, 2? Thoughts?
Your Honor, this is Tom Shetty from TAPCO. My initial reaction would be, it would be so specific, event specific, or so it will be a little difficult to come up with a generic estimate on the risk, and and that is my initial take on that. So unlike other things where you can estimate because there is some data, this is going to be so difficult because it could go anywhere. Although that being said, these are, in my opinion, are very unlikely event. But if it happens, it could be it could, depending on the incident, it could be a bigger dollar amount if you look in terms of a payout or anything like that. But very unlikely event, the impact could be depends on situation, but difficult to generalize and come up with a valuation.
Right. Well, the order requires the plans to contain a narrative description, estimate of costs, and identify the source of funding. That's all for the measures that are going to be taken for prevention. Did you envision that narrative description would address what we were just talking about at all, or?
Yeah, I think I think as far as like the damage of an individual battery cell, and if we had to change that out, I think we envision that would be encapsulated, maybe in the decommissioned disposal plans piece of this paragraph. I could say we did not envision, a broader, liability risk or, the costs associated with if we had a complete system loss because we had to activate a water suppression system. That was not part of our original interpretation of this. We were more focused on the initial plan for preventing and addressing fires and what's being put into place as part of the design of the project to mitigate that risk.
Okay. Do some projects have greater risk than others?
I don't think necessarily greater risk than others. There's different battery chemistries from one project to the next, and that may require some different provisions. The exception is the Elk Neck project. The only difference with that project is the residential batteries, and they're located at a customer's home. So while we think the risk is very, very low, there is that associated risk with us being located at a customer's home with that third-party solution. The other projects are all located on kind of their own sites that are either commercial properties owned by others or utility properties.
So the consideration of any risk might be contemplated when someone is reviewing where the facility is being located. Is that what you're saying? If it's if it's a residence and it's going to be in a residence, you understand what risks there might be versus the bus station. I guess it doesn't sound like you intend to do any more narrative, and unless someone else thinks there's something that should be addressed here, the working group should address this potential risk as an additional item.
Yes, Your Honor. And, in specific, the Elk Neck project, which is the virtual power plant with residential batteries, there is going to be some additional description around the risk with that being at a residential property. That was specifically called out in the order. So we do plan on addressing that project specifically, but we weren't intending to do so on the other 5 projects between BG and PHI at this time.
Okay. And it's just a narrative of the risk because it's in residential houses, not any sort of cost associated with that.
Correct.
Okay. Does anyone have anything they want to, any input on that? Any thought? If it doesn't bother anyone else, I'm not saying it bothers me. I just wanted to bring it up. Okay. Sounds like no one else thinks there's something that should be added to the working group's submission on that.
Okay. And then lastly, briefly, because I know we're past our time. As far as decommissioned disposal, similar to the fire prevention mitigation, each of the utilities is going to be coming up with a decommissioned disposal plan specific to the individual projects. Every project might be a little bit different due to different battery chemistries as far as disposal costs, and we'll be working with our vendors for recommendations that they may have on their specific battery handling and decommissioning. Ultimately, for the utility-owned projects, which are the Ocean City, National Harbor, and I believe the Chesapeake Beach for BGE projects, PHI and BGE are going to be responsible for the decommissioning disposal at the end of useful life, whereas the third-party projects, the vendors or the developers or the owners are going to be responsible for the disposal. But in any case, in general, all the wastes will be characterized and determine the appropriate method for disposal of recycling material.
And the costs are being captured.
And the costs as well. Yes, Your Honor. And the costs, will again be specific to the specific projects. The Elk project will have different costs than the Ocean City project, just because of the different types of batteries that we're talking about. And then, the plans will be reviewed in compliance with applicable environmental laws and regulations, as well as PHI and BG have internal approved disposal vendors that are authorized to handle and dispose waste for the Exelon utilities. So we'll be working with the various vendors as well as for the utility-owned projects to develop that narrative description on handling, disposal, and removal of damaged batteries, description of the overall decommissioning of the system, including recycling of the battery cells as well as the other equipment, which would be handled similar to our other utility equipment in our traditional waste streams, and then an estimate of disposal and decommissioning costs for each one of the systems.
Okay.
Your Honor, quick note here. This is Justin from BGE. The Fairhaven project for BGE is the utility-owned, and Chesapeake is the third-party owned, just to clarify.
Thanks, Justin. I got that mixed up. Thanks.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
So those are the items that were required for our compliance filing on February 1st. So we just wanted to kind of share that information with you as we work towards that compliance filing. Be a joint filing across PEPCO, BGE, and DPL as part of that compliance.
Okay.
Hi, this is Erica Bannerman. I have a quick question. Is there any plans by the utility to share the plans with local governmental entities for comments?
Yep, I'll speak up. This is Justin from PGE. Yeah, so this actually came up in some of our discussions, and where our plan is to reach out to the authorities having jurisdiction sometime this year to set up meetings in the new year, preferably before the filing, though we'll try to move as quickly as we can to socialize it both with like first responders, fire, as well as local authorities to make sure that they're being briefed on the project as it goes forward and make those introductions.
Yeah, and this is Jason for PHI. Very similar for us, Erica, especially on the PEPCO project. In Prince George's County, we've already had some initial discussions with the fire department on that project specifically, and we would intend to engage the fire department as we build out the final plans for sure. And then, if there's the opportunity before the February 1st filing in the January timeframe, once we have the preliminary plans together, we would welcome the opportunity to share that with the local authorities, local authority having jurisdiction.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Okay, does anybody have anything else? No one? Feel free to speak up. Otherwise, again, submissions by the 15th of January, our next meeting, 2 p.m. on January 28th. I'll send out an email to the entire working group, and we'll do the invite process again. If not, thank you, everyone. I think it was a good meeting.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for setting it up.
No problem. All
Thanks,
right.
Judge.
Thank you.
Let me know if we need to do anything, anything changes or we need to do something to move the dates. Otherwise, I'll see everyone on the 28th. Thank you.
Thank you, Your
Very
Honor.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Happy
Same to you.